This is the Fiat Barchetta, the small Italian spider that made fire in the 90s. And I'm your host Myro, let's get straight into it. These cars were produced from the 95 up to 2005. With major changes, the bigger one, a facelift, arrived in 2003. This Barchetta is actually designed for an old Ferrari. And yes, it goes with this stripe and line all around the car. And with this design, really reminds of Ferraris of the 90s. This headlight is also pretty unique with interior black design. And yes, take note, this is hard to find, so in slightly minor damages and crashes, you will have a hard time to find this headlight, and it's also plastic, it tends to fade in the sun. The body panels of this car are pretty unique because they are made out of aluminium. And the back part of the Fiat Barchetta is also really well designed, and it ages really well. Even this almost 30-year-old car pretty stands out even in today's standard. Double pipe exhaust, and yes, you will get a pretty punchy sound from the 1.8 131 horsepower. Yes, this is a 60 valve engine producing 131 horsepower, and it actually have a variator, just like my Alpha 2.0 twin spark. And yes, you will get the rattling sound when the variator fails, and the variator fails in each model of this motor, so it's needed to be changed. It's not an expensive part, but you'll get the rattling noise and a slightly lower power delivery on your lower rev. Most of the times these variators get stuck in the higher settings, so when revving it up you will get kind of the same power, but in a lower rev you will kind of struggle with a failed variator. So most of the times it's recommended to change the variator. Other than that, these motors will be really fine if you regularly maintain it and actually change the oil and check the oil level with the chain belt. You will be having this motor in many other models, just like the Fiat Stilo up to 2003, the Fiat Punto Abarth, the second phase edition, and also in some Fiat Bravos 1.8 16 valves. One of the amazingly designed things on this car is the door handle. Well, today a lot of designers tend to copy this design, but this is really unique. This Fiat Barchetta interior is kind of a mix of the 90s Fiat. We have a Fiat Punto GT steering wheel that was also fitted on the Fiat Punto GT, and also the Fiat Punto GT seats. Dial design is quite unique with analog numbers. Most of these cars were also without climate control. The center dash incorporates that 90 digital clock vibe. Most of these cars had just one airbag, with the passenger side just having the glove box. Okay, I have an ant of this size going under the Barchetta. This car is almost 30 years old, exactly 28 years old, and yes, it has been repainted. One of the biggest struggles for my size is actually fit in this car. I'm 185 centimeters tall, and actually I'm having a difficult time to adjust myself to a perfect position of driving, because yes, first we have the wind deflector that actually obstructing my seat to have on the back position, and also my head is over the top of the windscreen line, so I will be getting a lot of wind going up into my hair. This Fiat Barchetta is actually a modern classic, and for today we are actually looking at around 7,000 to 8,000 euros for a pristine model like that. Also, you are getting much higher prices for that early models in pristine conditions and for the late 2004 and 5 models. But as per today, you can get it pretty cheap and it will rise in value for sure. And actually I will look over for a well-maintained car with service history. And yes, it has front and rear disc brakes. As for the boot, well, it's really small at around 120 liters. If you're in the league to get this car, get it with the wind deflector, because the wind noise and the wind circulating in your head will be really high without this wind deflector, and it really helps. Take note that behind the seats you don't have any space to put anything. On the driver's side you will get a leather pocket. On the passenger side you don't get nothing. The sun visors are tiny, but the windscreen is also tiny, so it kind of matches the design. Take note that this car was discontinued in 2005. So spare parts for this car will be really limited. You are still normally able to find the engine parts, while all the other body parts and interiors are really limited, and I actually recommend to some Facebook Fiat Barchetta groups and also to some forum groups, and you'll find there all the parts necessary to get going with your car. The ride quality of this Fiat Barchetta that's almost 30-year-old is pretty good for an Fiat Punto MK1 basis and chassis. The model is actually lower by 3 centimeters from the owner, and actually is driving really stiff and actually more precisely than the regular standard model. Fiat Barchetta is also pretty light at around 1 ton and actually really nimble on the corners. The fuel consumption of this car is around how you drive it, but around 10 liters, and the fuel capacity is 50 liters on the fuel tank. So you will be getting around 500 kilometers with this car, and this is pretty great for a small Spider to drive along the country. With a 1.8 131 horsepower, you get a declared 200 kilometers top speed, and yes, you can achieve it easily, but take one note. After 150 or 160 kilometers an hour, your steering is just light and you are kind of feeling that you are flying, because the actual under part of the car is slightly rising due to the wind. And yes, you're kind of feeling that you are losing control at that speed, so feeling that could get airborne anytime. As an Alpha Spider 2.0 owner, this is actually getting much more views when I'm driving it rather than the Alpha Spider. Maybe because this is a red car and my Alpha Spider is silver, but maybe because this looks actually remind of some Ferraris early 90s or actually mid 90s, and it has this great Ferrari color that actually enhances the looks. And with these 15-inch rims, it makes it really stand apart. Most of these cars have a roof that it's not in the best shape anymore. And actually, on this model, the roof has been remade about 15 years ago. But still, it's getting also through some punching and beating, and it's not perfect anymore with some holes on it. And I will explain you why. There is a metal hinge that actually falls down to actually fall down the roof. And on this part you are getting a slightly rubbing on the interior part of the roof. And yes, after a while the roof will get damaged. On this particular model we have the damage on both sides. So eventually this roof will have to be remade. When getting in Fiat Barchetta, just make sure that you are getting it for your secondary or third car, for the weekend drives or actually for the fun drives, and not for an everyday daily driver. This car was designed in the Fiat Centro stile, and yes, through the years it has switched from 2 factories, because the Majora factory closed down at around 2002, so they have switched factory and continue the production. Don't forget to subscribe, because these reviews take really long time to make. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I will be happy to answer to all of them. Until my next one, thanks for watching.